What we'd like to start now is our first panel. So would the panelists please come up for session number 1? This is going to be for the American Muslim Consumer Market Study 2014. The session will focus on the executive summary of the American Muslim Market 2014 study findings, the latest national survey driven by the fact-based voice of the American Muslim community. Will present a pulse of their consumption needs and concerns, including a special focus on halal food, finance, and education categories. An interactive discussion will focus on actionable insights and strategies derived from the study's findings and expert views to equip businesses to best address American Muslim consumers. And please note that we will have people walking around picking up note cards if you would like to ask a question. We'll have a mic set up so that at the end of each panel session, we will give you some opportunity, should there be time, for you to ask questions and then hopefully get your answers. So let's take it away, Iman.
Assalamu alaikum. For the American Muslim market study that we're doing, some questions are popping up, and one of the things is, what is the state of the American Muslim consumers nationally? If you think about this in your mind, maybe how have products and services for the American Muslim evolved in the last few years? And this is what we're going to be talking about today. Are the American Muslim community's priority needs of halal or education met, and how well are they met? And what is the opportunity for businesses like yourselves also in the global Islamic American market? These are some of the types of things that we're going to be able to speak about today. And so for the next 10 minutes, we're going to go through the American Muslim market study. It's going to be broken down in 2 parts. The first part is I'm going to be talking about the actual market and the breakup of the market and giving you some data points there. And then the other half, we're going to go and we're going to dive deeply into some of the highlights for the actual survey insights. And then after that, we will actually start the panel discussion, but we want to start off with a baseline about the actual American Muslim market. So let's move on. Basically, we're building on the 2011 report, and so we want to give you the pulse, what happened from 2011 to 2014. There are 4 things that we're going to be focusing on, and we want to focus on the consumer demand. The second thing is the national survey insights, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on, when we actually did an original national survey. The third thing is giving you a snapshot of the global Islamic market. And we also did some rich case studies for each of the sectors in food, finance, clothing, pharmaceuticals, and so on. So we're going to be, basically that's the makeup of the study. But I'd like to first, before we actually go into the survey insights, I'd like to tell you about the approach that we took, just to give you a baseline of the research, and more specifically about the national survey that we did. We did an original survey from July 1st to October 10th. We had 973 full, complete responses, and this is spread out across America for our American Muslims. And it was both geographically representative and also ethnically representative. And it's comparable to the actual breakdown of the American Muslim market. And for those statisticians out there, it's a 99% confidence level. Now, we'll go into the global context before we go into the American Muslim context. For those of you businesses and startups or entrepreneurs that are looking for the global Islamic market opportunities, we have actually sized the market to $1.62 trillion, as Rafi mentioned. It's a Muslim lifestyle market, and that breaks down into the consumer expenditure core sectors, which are food, finance, clothing, also travel, media, recreation, and pharmaceutical and cosmetics. And then if you want to add the finance, actually, if you want to add to that, the assets, you also will add more than 1.62 trillion. But if you look down over there, if you look down to the American Muslim sector, you'll see that there are three big sectors for the American Muslim, and that is the food sector, the clothing sector, and the travel sector. And they're sized at 12.6 billion for food, and clothing 5.4 billion, and travel 1.9 billion. Those are the big sectors. And what makes these silos come together? Really, it is the driving factor is the Islamic values, consumer demand that are driving these markets. And you'll see examples already of companies that are entering the space, companies like Elevation Burger that we have. We also see Noor Pharmaceuticals, that it is moving to these places. We have, I believe we have Fajr Capital that is here with us. And so we have people in these, moving in or entering or already entered into these markets. But what about the actual American Muslim consumer? What does it look like? What are we made up of? So first, our population has been sized to 5.7 million. And we also have 1.7 households and our disposable income of 98 billion. As a whole, we are younger than the average national American numbers. We're younger and at par income-wise and at par education-wise as well. So if you look at the disposable income, it's as a whole 98 million. There are three big sectors. You'll see the housing sector, the food and food services sector, and the motor and vehicle sector are the biggest sectors there. And we compare it to the national American average breakdown. We compared those numbers, and we also included this in the survey, the household budget. One big variance that we noticed is actually in the education spending. Our education spending, even though it's number 8 for the average American, it's actually listed as number 4 for the American Muslim community. And so that was a big variance for us. And you'll see later on, we'll get into the details of that. So these are the characteristics of the market, but what do you do if you want to engage in the market? How do you engage in the market? There are three important market dynamics you have to know before you can engage in the market. The first one is that Muslims are geographically dispersed, okay? And probably, and sometimes that can be a challenge, and the opportunity is that 85% of Muslims in America are actually within 15 states. And the second one is that we're ethnically diverse, and you can see that in the audience here, of course, and everywhere we go. There are our major ethnicities are South Asian, of course, and Arab, also African American and Caucasian. So those are the major ethnicities. And the reason why it's important to know that is because when we're engaging with them, they might have different, although sometimes we have commonalities on how to engage them, sometimes we have different avenues. So we'll have the different ethnic media or different organizations or different events that they attend. And so if you want to engage them, you will have to know the difference, your breakdown of ethnicities. And the third important one we have to make sure that we remember is that we're a community-centric community. We're very much around the community, and we basically what binds us is the actual, like the mosque and the community centers actually bind us together. And so if we're going to be engaging with the community, a very smart way to do it is to go through mosques and community centers, through media that's connected to the mosque, and so forth. We're going to go into the survey right now. There are 4 sections of the survey that we had. One was national retail, the second one was halal food, and then Islamic finance, and then to end off, we also have an education sector. So if we look at national retail first, some of the highlights that we wanted to show today was that nationally, when we asked the 973 respondents, 86% of them said that they want to see more halal food at their local supermarket. Okay? And here, if you see the bar chart, we also asked them where do they shop. And you'll see, with the exception of halal meat and ethnic or specialty items, over 64% shop at national or regional stores. And for some product categories, that can be up to 89%. So you can say to yourself, yes, American Muslims shop just like, as other Americans do. And the point driven here is that this is a grand opportunity for national retailers. This insight is a strong call to action for national retailers that Muslims do shop at, and Muslims do want their products at the national and their local stores. If we move on to halal food, some of the insights that we want to highlight is that when we ask the respondents where do they purchase their product, or do they purchase halal products to eat at home, they said 93% of them said yes. When we asked them do they prefer zabiha halal, 66% of them also said yes. And this is very consistent with our 2011 research, and actually is growing. And actually, there's one point here that I want to mention. It actually increased from 55% to 66% when we asked how many strictly preferred zabiha halal. It moved up 10 or 11% from 2011 to 2014. And a lot of that push is, surprisingly, interestingly enough, comes from Arab respondents as well. So we see this as an indicator that we will watch in the future. We also looked at different brands, the major brands in the halal food space, and we did this in 2011. We also did this in 2014. So we noticed a few things here. Asafa was both recognized as number one in 2011 and in 2014. We also have Midamere and Crescent Halal, and Ziad and Saffron Road as well. Saffron Road was increased the most from 2011 to 2014. But you'll see that in the purple section, you'll see the never heard. Our respondents, a lot of them said that they actually never heard of some of the of these brands. And so that's an indication that there's still a lot of opportunity that can be, there's a lot of opportunity that we can take advantage of throughout the USA. When we turn over to Islamic finance, you'll see that in Islamic finance, banking went down 11%, and car financing went up 8%. Insurance went up 3%, and that's from the results from 2011 to 2014. But you'll see that mortgage, if you look closely here, you'll see that the top Islamic finance product usage is mortgage, that's 50%, investment 44%, and banking at 17%. What's interesting here is that car financing went up 8%. And when we looked at the different respondents, we'd have a whole section of, business owners and what they use. And we found that a push from the car financing also was coming from the business owners, which is interesting. And there's some interesting, initiatives going on in Islamic finance when it comes to business loans. And you'll see startups like LaunchGood, for example, who are innovatively coming into the space with a crowdfund, also coming into the space innovatively. If we move on to the education, and this is our last one. If we move on to education, this whole section we didn't have in 2011. And the reason why we added it is because we noticed that when we looked at the household budget of the American Muslim compared to the national average, we saw that a big variance was that Muslims spend on education much more than the average American. And you'll see what happens is that if it was number 8 for the national average household breakdown, it actually went up to, it's actually number 4 for Muslims. And so because of that, we said, let's try to understand this sector more. And so one of the things that we wanted to point out today and highlight is that we asked, how satisfied are you based on, for your educational offerings? And we listed Islamic schools, we listed Sunday schools, and we listed also mainstream public schools, universities, college Islamic universities, tutoring. And we found that 42%, generally speaking, across these education offerings, were only somewhat satisfied. So the follow-up question to that is, okay, what is it that you want to improve? And so this is this graph here. The top 3 things that they wanted to improve. Number 1, they wanted to have their Islamic holidays recognized. And I know in the Virginia area just recently about the Montgomery County, there was an issue about this if you're aware of it. But basically, Islamic holidays was at 68%, and then high academic quality within the Islamic schools was number 2, and number 3 was better recreation and quality. And this varies a little bit ethnically, if you segment it ethnically, but this is the overall. But if we're going to be talking about education, we can't leave one thing. We really have to talk about, and right here, college education loans. And we also asked them about that. A staggering 80% basically wanted, a staggering 80% of our respondents, of our 973 respondents, said that they wanted interest-free college education loans. And 59% said they want to refinance their existing loans. So this is a major opportunity in the education sector for education entrepreneurs and also for Islamic financing. And lastly, the study concludes with a 4-step recommended strategy, a Muslim market strategy. And it's a practical guide, and it includes market sizing. It walks you through how to really take the information, break it down for your company in the American Muslim market and globally, and then gives you practical steps to work through that. So that's basically just a baseline research that we would like to start off the conference with. We're going to kick off the panel right now. What's going to happen for the rest of the session, we're going to have an initial reaction from each one of our panelists and about the study. And then we're going to have each panelist give some further details about how they took their company to the next level in this industry, what's the pulse of the growing trends in 2014. And then we're going to just have a few minutes at the end for some final Q&A. Thank you. Thank you. So I'd like to start off with Adnan and Durrani. We have a very distinguished panel. I was very excited to be on this panel because of the wealth of expertise that we have here. So I'll introduce the panelists first, and then we'll start off with Adnan. So first we have Adnan Durrani, who is the CEO of American Halal Company, which is also owns Saffron Road, and he's a serial entrepreneur and venture capitalist. And then we have over here to our right, Hatem Bazian. He is the co-founder of Zaytuna as well. And then we also have here Shahed Amanullah, who used to work for the Department of State. He is launching LaunchPosse, and as we know him, of Zabiha Halal, right? Zabihahalal.com, yes. And then we also have Errol Schweizer. Thank you for joining us. He is the global coordinator for Whole Foods, and we're very happy to have him here. He has a wealth of experience as well. So we'll start off with Adnan. If you can give us a quick reaction of the study and some highlights or of actually the survey findings as well.
Yeah, Bismillah ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum to everyone. I'm actually very touched to be on this panel because there's so many connections here. Matter of fact, Shahed used to be on our board, and the studies we did with him are what we took into Errol that convinced him to carry our products in Whole Foods. And I sit on Hatem's board as well, so it's a very incestuous crowd up here. Any study that says that 86% of the respondents say that they want more halal foods in supermarkets, I'm a fan of. So I want to commend you for a wonderful study, and there's such little research, and you've really gone deep and done a great job here. I think the things that also stick out to me were some of the way you broke it out into demographics and how there's an increase in wanting more zabi halal, with the true Islamic slaughter done properly. Of course, there would need to be a fine-tuning on that aspect as well. Is it machine or is it hand, which was kind of missing from the study. But I think that overall I was pretty impressed with it. We don't really sell into halal stores, we're selling more into mainstream supermarket stores. So we're not just selling to the Muslim population, so our number is going to be a little skewed in terms of maybe brand recognition. It shows that we need to do a lot more work in promoting our products perhaps in the community. There's a lot more opportunity for us there. I was also impressed by the other brands and how there's a shift going on. I mean, the market is so big and there's so much opportunity. So I'm really glad to see that a lot of your statistics are pretty much pointing out what we had ascertained.
Thank you. And since we're talking about retailers, we'll go over to Errol. What was your quick reaction of the study and our findings?
Yeah, it sounds very familiar based on our experience over the last several years. We had always sold a small percentage of halal foods, usually in energy bars and snacks, and we'd gotten used to seeing those sort of symbols on products over the years. And after the research that Adnan presented to us back in, I think it was 2010, really convinced us that we had a huge opportunity. We had Muslim shoppers in our stores. A lot of the values connected and the demographics made sense, especially the recognition of education, the value of education, as most of our stores are located in areas where folks have advanced degrees in those universities. Even more so than income, it's actually education drives a lot of our store sightings. So the other thing that I noticed on that survey was the youthfulness of the Muslim consumer demographic. And Whole Foods Market is very popular among younger folks, millennial, Gen Y, as you may call it. And I think we're creating a lot of loyalty among those shoppers because we emphasize our values and our commitment to quality standards and our transparency. And those are all things that we've seen with Saffron Road brand, and that we are able to connect with shoppers on the product because it's high quality, it tastes great, and speaks to what folks are looking for. So pretty optimistic, especially after seeing this study, and would like to see more information because I think there's probably a lot of other opportunities for us to explore in the sector as well.
Yeah, it was so interesting that you mentioned it. I know you pointed this out as well, Adnan, that it's more than income that you're looking at. When you're talking about these products, you're looking at education level. I thought that was a great insight. And speaking about education, I know, Dr. Bazian, we have a lot to say, and we're talking about the education, also education spending.
First, let me say it's very critical for us to conduct the studies because as Muslims, we have not been yet engaged in self-study to create our own narrative. Mm-hmm. So studying our own self, our own market, looking at our own household is very critical because it's actually creating a space for us overall, and I think from an educational perspective is very, very important. Seeing some of the statistics, and I did also a regular study in the Bay Area, what we see is the expenditures of the Muslims in relation to education is one of the highest. We do have one of the highest rates for education. 74% of the Muslims that we surveyed have some education. But I think the challenge in here is in terms of the rising expenditure that gets people to take loans. The student loan problem right now in this country is one of the largest. Students collectively have $1.2 trillion debt that they're carrying, which is making the opportunity a possibility for many across the country really difficult. So I think this is an area that we need to explore, since many of those that you surveyed would like to have access to interest-free loans. And that's, I think, where some of the creativity that we need to engage in relations to the Muslim community.
Right, right. And there are also initiatives starting up. We did a case study also on Recenter and some other initiatives in the African Development Center that's working on education loans and business loans. And I know, Shahed, you can probably talk about so many sectors. I know as a serial entrepreneur, you have finance and halal, you have Zabiha Halal, and you also have a big push on social media. You have a lot of things to say. Go ahead.
No, first of all, I think it was a fantastic snapshot of the American Muslim consumer. But those of you in the audience who have been in this space for, I'd say, 10, 15 years, will understand when I say that this demographic has so profoundly changed in the last decade. It's really amazing. I wish if this kind of study was taken maybe 10 years ago or even 15 years ago, I think you'd see a profound shift. And the main way that I think that we've seen a change is that we've gone from an affinity-based market where people would want to market to us solely because of our affinity as a Muslim group to much more of a values-based market where people are actually, it's not good enough, and I saw this a lot with Zabiha.com, it's not good enough that it's just technically halal, right? They're looking for their values expressed in their food. And this is why I think, for example, it's such a great fit with Whole Foods, because Whole Foods is also a values-based service. And now you see that the expectations in the market have leapt. I remember growing up, I didn't care if the shop was, unsanitary and there were flies or whatever, as long as it was halal, I would take it. And I think we were treated as, we were lucky to have them, right? It's been completely flipped on its head. And the good thing about that is that as you become a values-based market, you're willing to pay more. You're willing to pay a premium if your values are represented. And so that's both an opportunity for those of us in that business, and it's an opportunity for the consumer to project their values onto the producers and make them produce.
And I think that's a great segue into our talking points. We're going to be right now just each one of the panelists are going to have a few talking points, going in more detail about what their company has done in the industry to take it to the next level, and speaking to these major paradigm shifts. So, Adnan, I know you wanted to talk about taking halal to the next level. You can go ahead and start.
Are we going to go through the slides as well? Or?
Sure. I think it's up there, brother. Do you want to get it? There's a clicker on there. Yeah. Okay. Oh, here it is. I'll click it for you. How's that? Okay. So, taking halal to the next level, we'll have you start.
Yeah, I like to call it the Ummah's wake-up call. And if you can flip to the next slide.
Sure.
So what I wanted to talk about also is that what we've really done at Zafran Road, alhamdulillah, is really create a category killer. We went out very strong 4 years ago with enormous support from Whole Foods, and Errol is pretty much the gatekeeper for $13 billion of products that go through Whole Foods. He's too modest to tell you that, but he was a champion for us early on. Our sales have gone up, triple digits every year. They're growing at over 200%. In mainstream, non-halal, competing against non-halal competitors. Just to give you an example, AC Nielsen and Spins, which is the most trusted ranking of brands in the country, it's the one all the major Fortune 500 companies use. They ranked us as the fastest growing brand of natural frozen entrees in the U.S. Not just halal or not just kosher, the fastest growing brand, period, of all frozen natural entrees in the whole country, in all 50 states. Thank you. And the reason I'm saying that is to give you an idea that halal, when it's really positioned with the right values, has a much broader reach than just the Muslim community. Obviously, we serve that community with a very dedicated core value system, but it really is much bigger. It's what I call aspirational paradigm. We, like I say, we're beating the halal out of major food conglomerates. Nestle, which has the largest brand, Lean Cuisine, it's down $200 million in the last 12 months. ConAgra's Healthy Choice and Heinz Weight Watchers are also down 15 to 25%. And we continue to grow at triple digits. We're in 10,000 stores right now. So what I mean when I say an aspirational paradigm, these are the values that we appeal to. We always say that our innovation supports our values. It's sort of what Shahed was talking about. We're ethically sourced. Even more important to organic to us is how the animals were raised. What was the proper animal welfare? The Prophet ﷺ used to say that the welfare of the animal was more important than the zabiyah, than even the slaughter. And also, how wholesome is it? How tayyib is it? So, Hartman Group, which is one of the top agencies in research marketing, ranked us among 5 cultural power brands, which in this early stage, in 4 years, I've built other brands like Stonyfield. It took us 15 years to get to that level with Hartman. So they've already ranked us among the top 4 brands in terms of the cultural power we have with the community or with the consumer group. And they're not just talking about the Muslim community, they're talking about the natural food community. So why are we like that? We were the first non-GMO frozen entree in the world that was verified. We now have 17 non-GMO verified products. In some ways, it's a higher bar than organic. 80% or 90% of our line is gluten-free certified. Everything we do is certified by Tier 1 third-party certifiers. So we don't just make self-claims. That's what Whole Foods loves about us. We bring in third-party certifiers who are extremely well-regarded in their category to authenticate, to audit, to work with our farms, to work with our factories to make sure everything is up to par. These are the important values. I like to say it's about ihsan, it's about beauty, it's about excellence. So instead of just competing and going to the lowest rung on the halal ladder, we didn't even look at that. We said we're going to define halal according to a value system that we want to treasure, and Errol, CEO and president, have often told me, thank you so much for lifting the standards in our chain. And I said, thank you. We should be kissing your feet, thanking you for what you did for us. And Walter Robb told me, the CEO of Whole Foods, no, you've lifted the standards in our entire store because many other brands that didn't have these values have now risen in our store to those values.
Great.
And the last slide is just, and so I'll say, the win-win partnership that we've already done with Whole Foods, Errol will talk a little bit about this, but we were lucky to connect with a mission-aligned partner like Whole Foods, and this is how we promoted and created displays. Sorry, one back. And just to conclude, my call to action for the audience here really is to rise to this occasion, demand much higher standards from halal brands, hound the retailers to carry halal products, get busy on social media, and also in terms of for the entrepreneurs, believe in yourself. Don't think that you have to undercut yourself anyway because you're Muslim or because you're marketing a halal product. Take the higher ground. Don't be a copycat or a Me Too brand. Use diligent research in terms of what you're doing. Don't trust the research that's out there. The DinarStandard report is a great one to start with, but think long term. Think about partnerships, not just what's opportunistic. And as my former colleague, God bless her soul, Anita Roddick from Body Shop used to say that if you think you're too small to make a difference, you've never slept with a mosquito. So just keep plugging away, and there's huge opportunities that I see, not just in food, but in all of the halal categories.
Thank you. Errol, what's your take on everything from the Whole Foods perspective, from national retail's perspective?
So the funny thing was, when we were putting together our slides, completely separately, Adnan and myself nearly had the very same presentation. So age before beauty, and I let Adnan pretty much guide the talk here. So just to give you a little context on what we do at Whole Foods, I'm a coordinator for the grocery department nationally, which is our center store, dry goods, frozen, bulk products, as well as dairy. It's about 75 different categories and represents about 30% of our sales. And because Whole Foods is decentralized, we have a really empowered store culture. We essentially try to build consensus among our 11 domestic operating regions around different programs. Not to get too technical, we have a category review process, and what that means is we look at each category separately and look for trends and work with our suppliers to develop new products and promotions and marketing, do events. And somehow, Saffron Road has navigated this really complex and somewhat maddening process that keeps Whole Foods unique in order to become our fastest growing frozen entree brand, one of our fastest growing brands across the board. And that's because it hits on a lot of the same themes that we see our customers responding to. And that's the great thing about what we can do at Whole Foods is we don't just drive trends, we really follow our customers. We watch data, we talk to folks, we are our customers. I've been shopping at Whole Foods longer than I've been working there. And so anything that we put on shelf is because there's a sense that this is what our customers are looking for. So we have a number of core values. You probably have seen them in some of our stores. The main one that we're really focused on is we sell the highest quality natural and organic foods, all about satisfying our customers, empowering our team members, creating partnerships with suppliers, healthy products. So we boil that down into a number of different product trends. So non-GMO verified, the elimination of genetically modified organisms from our supply chain is a major part of our transparency initiative. Organic sourcing, we sell close to $2 billion in organic foods in my department. Responsible sourcing, such as fair trade and other ethical trading paradigms, very important, huge growth trend for us. The main thing with that is don't be caught being unfair. You know, anybody with a smartphone could really find something out nasty about your supply chain if you're not doing the right thing. And then you mainly raise proteins, which Saffron Road has been a part of as well. Next slide.
Okay.
And the way we do this is just, we're merchants at Whole Foods. We're retailers. We like to sell stuff. And that goes from, you know, my team all the way down to the store level, and we want to feel good about what we're selling. So this has not happened overnight with Saffron Road when we initially launched it. To be honest, there was a lot of nervous energy in some quarters at Whole Foods. For me and my team, you know, I grew up in New York, and other folks on my team grew up in the cities, and you know, I used to go on Roosevelt Avenue to the halal shops, and I had friends who were Muslim. It just, for me, it wasn't a big deal, but you know, we got a backlash when we first launched Saffron Road, and folks weren't all behind it. But you know, Adnan had our back, and a lot of team members supported. We have a lot of Muslim team members, and year after year, we've built on this program, primarily focused around Ramadan. As that's how we've done kosher as well, by building programs around events like Passover and Hanukkah, as opposed to just putting stuff on shelf every day. And so these events have really galvanized this energy for the brand, bringing visibility to it. Adnan working with our PR team to get bloggers to talk about the event, to just educate our consumers and our team members about what halal means and what Ramadan means, and the attributes of this product as well as other halal products. Which we do carry other halal products. And I think this year was probably the first time after 4 years of plugging away that we kind of nailed it. We had pretty good execution in our stores. There was great pictures. The energy from team members all the way up through leadership was overall really positive, and the bottom line was great, literally. Dollar sales, the sales growth, were all really, really nice. And to me, that shows that we've sort of arrived. And it's still an opportunity we could find in other categories, and Saffron Road continues to expand into other categories as well. Next slide. Sure. And then, you know, the press on it's been great too, because we've been able to tie that back to what we've been doing at Whole Foods. And so I just wanted to clip these because I'm just really proud of Adnan, and I know Jack for a long time as well, to see them talking about it in really a coherent way. And that it speaks to how we've done work in our, like I said, our kosher sets, but also that they've hit a lot of the same values, the same quality standards, the same product attributes that have been successful across the store.
Thank you very much. And we'll shift over to the education. I know we want to talk about higher education and shifting paradigms there.
Yeah. We started Zaytuna College in 2008, and if we think about Zaytuna College as a progression, the Muslim community had already went through the mosque building phase, the school building phase, but now there isn't really an institution that could train Muslim students in the higher education space. There was many attempts in the past in Chicago and other places. So Zaytuna College was to try to close the circle in terms of training and build an institution that will address the needs of higher education for the Muslim community. And your study was showing that 48% want to have a Islamic university option. So I think that statistic, we did the study ourselves early on when we were thinking about developing the college. So that matches exactly what some of our own studies that we conducted, whether a college will be successful or not. Now we're on the 5th year. We just have had the WASC visit, the Western Association for Senior Schools and Colleges, and our report to them, they said that you have actually presented a new paradigm and a new challenge for us, because your proposal and your institution is something that is a breath of fresh air. And they just had the visit with our institution just a couple of weeks back. We are a liberal art institution, but we want to do it in us not only to define Muslim education, but we want to have an impact on higher education in general. So we would be, in that sense, not thinking how to catch up, but how to set a new standard. Our faculty comes from all types of background, both traditional training as well as Western training, and our institution is attempting to do something that is unique. It hasn't been done in the past, which is how to make a continuity between the Islamic tradition and what we call Western tradition. Even though in our feeling, we feel that it's a continuity, that there isn't this separation, this is an imaginary separation. One of the aspects in terms of student loans, we have a commitment in Zaytuna institution is to graduate our students with zero debt. And what we did is we worked to try to create a stream for zakat, and for us to remember that Islamic education have always been free. Islamic institutions were always supported as awqaf, as endowment. Not only that, but in the city of Baghdad, there were 18 hospitals during the high period of the classical period, and all were free. You could come in and get from A to Z treatment without being paid. All that was supported by awqaf. So we have to be also creative of how to reconstitute the tradition in the modern world. And I think there are many areas in here where Islam can have a major contribution. I also mentioned that in the city of Damascus, there were actually endowments for providing food for cats, where a milk service that would put for stray cats milk out for them to drink, as well as for attending to the animals. So it's not a matter of not having something in our tradition that we could lean on, but it's how to reconfigure it in order for us to have a value proposition in a very dynamic and fast-moving world at this particular time. We already graduated our first class of students this past May. We were not yet accredited, but 5 of our students applied for a Master PhD program, and they were actually admitted into Master PhD programs without accreditation. The Claremont colleges, graduate colleges in LA, said any graduate that you get from Zaytuna College, we will give them advanced placement in our PhD track a year and a half. Because of the quality of what you're producing, the fact that the students are graduating with 5 years of Arabic, they have almost 70 different units in the Islamic tradition. Our graduate students who finish the PhD barely finish 48 units, and they barely finish 2 years of Arabic. So even at the BA level, you are ahead of the PhD track at an institution that had almost 70 years of experience. So this is the challenge that, as a Zaytuna College, that we're looking at. And then at a future time, we will be looking at setting up a Master PhD program within possibly the cluster of the Graduate Theological Union. Lastly, in terms of the Muslim community, in terms of other survey, 30% of the Muslim community have a BA degree, about 25% have a graduate school, and 5% hold PhD, which is much, much higher than any of the other segments. The national average is about 1.5%. So in certain segments relative to the PhD track for the Muslim community, they're highly, highly educated. One center that I did the study on, they had 500 PhDs in one mosque in the Santa Clara area. If you take that 500 PhDs, it would be the educated class in any country in some parts of the world. So that's where you have, in terms of education, how for us to benefit from that cross sectors that are available, whether it's in medicine, engineering, higher education, and so on. And I think we have tremendous opportunities in the future, and I'm confident that the Muslim community are beginning to create their narrative on a daily basis. And this work that you're doing here is very critical as part of this story.
Thank you, Dr. Bazian. Thank you. And we see these trends coming that we're younger than the national average, and we're also much inclined into education. I think we can't finish this session without speaking about social media trends. And in our study, although we haven't mentioned it in our full report, we also have social media trends increasing. And I think that everybody is aware of this. Would you be able to speak to that, please?
Absolutely, absolutely. I've spent much of my career steeped in two different areas. One is the emerging halal marketplace and seeing and tracking its growth, particularly online. And the second is seeing and trying to influence media narratives about Muslims. So I want to talk about that because, next slide. So halal markets have grown in relative isolation. Now imagine back before 5 years ago, like back before this conference was started, when you talked about the halal marketplace, it was generally by Muslims, for Muslims. It was kind of underneath the media radar. There wasn't a lot of talk about it in the general landscape. Next slide. But what's been happening, especially in the years since after 9/11, we've actually seen media narratives about Muslims starting to spiral down, or particularly in the last few years. Now I have to say that this flies in the face of the reality of Muslims in America, which is that in the years since 9/11, we are better educated, more integrated, happier, more politically integrated, better media representations in certain segments, not necessarily the news. For example, we have twice the number of mosques in this country today than we did in the days after 9/11. That is a dynamic reality. But if you look on social media, if you look at certain segments of the media, these narratives are very strong about Muslims. And we've reached this point now, next slide. We've reached this point now where those two are starting to collide. As the halal market, as we've said, we're transitioning from an affinity-based to a value-based, which means we're expanding. You can see, like, for example, with Saffron Road, expanding to the point where the majority of your customers are not Muslim, but they are experiencing the values that are inherent in the halal marketplace. That is now starting to interact and conflict with these media narratives in social media and in certain parts of the mainstream media, which are increasingly trying to marginalize us. So now, for example, you're seeing what we've seen in Europe actually for much longer, which is now people trying to now politicize and marginalize halal as a market segment, where you didn't really see this maybe 5 years ago or before that, right? And it's because these markets are growing and shifting and transitioning, and now with the halal carts in New York and things like that, you're starting to see now the average American is now interfacing with the halal market, and that is causing certain people some anxiety. Next slide. And of course, I've got to highlight you. We've reached this critical mass where we now are in that fork in the road. Do we continue just serving ourselves as an affinity, or do we now branch out and reach out to the rest of the world and take these values and share them as universal values with people, and have people who are not Muslim and will never become Muslim look at the halal market and say there's something of value in there for me and I'm willing to pay money for it, right? So this is the fork in the road. So which also means that we now have to actively take part in this media narrative if we're going to not allow us to be marginalized back into that small hole where it's just Muslims serving Muslims, right? Next slide. This requires us to understand what's going on out there, to understand the audience, the larger audience. When we talk about the halal marketplace, sometimes even a lot of us, and even myself as well, we talk as if we're just talking in a closed conversation. Now, those of you on social media know that you cannot have a closed conversation in the new media landscape. You can't do that. So you have to understand how your words and how your narratives impact every single one of these audiences, including those people who are afraid of, fearful of, want to marginalize halal markets because they see it as a threat. Now, the one thing I learned in my years of working in the media, particularly after 9/11, is that you cannot defeat a fear unless you understand it, right? You may disagree with the fact that people are afraid of this, but they are genuinely afraid because they don't know and because they're unaware, right? So that means you need to craft your media narratives in a way that comforts them, reassures them, shows them that they can be who they want to be and they can partake in the halal marketplace, and that's perfectly fine. It's not a threat to either one, right? And so the more actively that we put our marketing dollars into that bigger sphere. And I realize it's a big lift for those of you entering the halal marketplace and you're trying to make your place. And now I'm sitting here telling you, you don't just have to market to your customers, you actually have to market to everyone, because you actually have to be responsible for reinforcing this, what we're trying to define as the halal marketplace, as not just a Muslim-specific thing, but as a values-based thing that everyone can benefit from. And it's a big, heavy lift. I realize that. But this is something we have to do. Next slide. Because what we're trying to do here is, we can throw money at PR firms, we can go to our organizations and have them lobby, we can do so many things to try to influence things. But the number one tool we have in our toolbox is the power of our economy, right? We can leverage the growth engine that is our community. We are a very well-off community in America. We can leverage our growing institutions, and we can leverage people like Saffron Road, who have already done a lot to try to define in the mainstream marketplace what halal means in a way that is beneficial to everybody, right? This will have much more of a profound impact on Muslims in America than any, campaign that an organization does, or any PR campaign or anything like that. This is a way to solve multiple problems at one time. So it's a good thing that these two trends have interacted and intersected with each other. It's an opportunity. If we fail at this opportunity, we're going to be right back down to the corner stores with the flies buzzing around the halal meat, and that's what we're going to have to put up with. And I refuse to accept that as part of our future, because not just for selfish reasons, because I believe fundamentally that we are here as a benefit to society, and that our neighbors will feel lucky that we are here because their lives are enriched. And if we have that attitude in what we produce, then we can only succeed in all of these endeavors.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We're going to round out the session with just some Q&A. We have some questions prepared here. Also, I also have Brother Rafi Oddin Shiko with us. He's the lead on our study. Yes, he's there as well. He will be supporting us, and you can jump in at any time as well. I'll start off with Errol, going back to Errol. And you spoke a lot about halal foods, and you're really taking the lead in the national retailer front. And if we go back to the 86% of our respondents who said that they would like to see halal food products in supermarkets, what are other national retailers doing? What can they do?
They tend to copy us. Imitation and flattery, that old saying. And I think that's a great thing. Whole Foods tends to be 5 to 10 years ahead of most trends. We banned hydrogenated oils back in 2003, and that's achieved a lot of mainstream awareness. We banned high fructose corn syrup. We've been a leader with GMO transparency, obviously a leader on organic foods. So I expect that, especially with the decline in, I call them food-like products at conventional grocery stores in the frozen aisle, like folks aren't buying that stuff as much. It's just not as good as what they can get at Whole Foods, that a lot of the brands that we sell are moving more mainstream, and that spurs further innovation from Whole Foods Market to keep this pipeline going. So I expect that you will see more of a mainstreaming, and I also expect the result of that is that the Muslim community in the U.S. will be more embraced by the good food movement, by folks who are pushing to change the food system here in the United States, which is grossly unfair and unsustainable, into one that's much more resilient and sustainable and fair. And I'm looking forward to that.
If I could just say one thing also. Errol's
Well, my question was to you next.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, Errol's come all the way from Texas on a weekend to spend a whole day here with us at the conference, which is remarkable. And we do a lot of duas for him at Saffron Road and for his whole team in Whole Foods. When we launched, and consistently every year since, they've wanted to engage more and more with this community. They've been so brave when all the hate mail came in and all the threats came in when they first launched. They stood the winds, and they really took it. And they're such huge supporters and champions of the community. So I'd just like this audience to recognize that.
Thank you. Actually, my next question was for you. We have some questions here. I mean, we noticed the demographic change in the American Muslim market, which we were talking about with Shahed as well. And since you've been with Saffron, how has it been changing, and what do you see?
You know, I think we were, in a way, very lucky that the research we did early on supported exactly the trends that we're seeing now. So unlike the big food conglomerates that were focused on the baby boomers, I call that looking through the rearview mirror, we were focused on the millennials and the Gen Xers and the young consumers even 5 years ago when we did our business model. And it was not just for the Muslim community, it was a broad-based business model. So that is actualizing now very effectively, and we're hitting all the marks that we set in our plan 5 years ago. But the thing that I have seen change is, and I think I don't know if it's a change in the Muslim community or it's just a change in the young consumer in general, which is they're much more aspirational than they were 5 or 10 years ago. They are really looking for much higher values. I mean, that's why Whole Foods is so successful. And Errol's right, a lot of the big retailers are now looking to carry aspirational brands. So the shifting you see, like our biggest leg of our business is frozen. We have 3 other parts of the business that are shelf stable, that are doing well too, but the frozen is the driver. And generally speaking, a lot of Muslims didn't necessarily eat halal frozen foods because they just didn't have the values or the quality they were looking for, whether it was organic or antibiotic free or humanely raised. Now those options are available to them, and we're seeing a shift, not just in Muslim young consumers, but all young consumers who never ate frozen foods before, who are now seeing their values addressed and the quality of the products, a level of excellence that they feel very comfortable bringing them into their home.
Thank you. And if I can just switch over to education, I know you talked a lot about education loans. If I can just dig a little bit deeper, because it's such a big number, 80% want that education. What do you see in that area?
Well, I also am a faculty member at UC Berkeley, which is across the street from Zaytuna. The average student graduate today with $27,000 in debt. The graduate students, master, PhD, aside from engineering and medicine, graduate with between $97,000 to $98,000 in debt. Medicine, forget it. You're just talking about thousands of dollars if you're in law, and engineering likewise. So what we're seeing is that students who are coming out of college are already indebted, so much so that basically you're talking about from the cradle to the grave in debt. And as such, it limits the possibilities and the potential of creativity of our young people. Now, if you remember, the Prophet ﷺ said that debt can produce cowardness. And in a democratic society where the elite that we're graduating is already indebted, its courageous attempt to try to take bold and courageous decisions becomes tied up into fear that their life might not be as sustainable. So as such, we have a value commitment in terms of from Zaytuna College, as well as for me as a value in general, that how to make it possible for the student who graduate is to graduate without already not only a monkey but a big elephant on their back that is essentially weighing them down and not making it possible for them to enter into a life on a footing where they could have really the possibility and the potentiality of for a human being. Now, this can get us into the pressures that are emerging at the universities. As we know, the universities are moving into a corporate structure. So there's a heavy corporatization of the university, and therefore, as you move in that direction, financing into the university becomes part of a corporate structure. Interestingly enough, many of the universities that seek accreditation, they're seeking accreditation in order immediately to go into the debt possibility for students. When the accreditors came and asked us, said, we're not really interested in seeking federal financial aid for students. That's not why we're in this business. We want to graduate our students without debt, so we're not looking at trying to get the stamp of accreditation so we could go to the government to load the students with debt. We're not really interested in that. They were all shocked. They wanted us to ask the question again and again, is this really what you're saying? They said yes. Second is that we're not interested in actually making the student fees or tuitions being the driving force for sustaining the college. That's essentially looking at the student once again as part of a financial structure to support the college. So we have to be creative in this way. And I think, once again, zakat have historically been the avenue, and the endowment, setting up the endowment was the avenue to graduate students and to graduate the next generation without having any debt or weighing them down with such responsibility as they are pursuing education.
Okay, Brother Rafi, do you have any questions? Or? Okay.
But I think as a matter of just engaging the audience also, I believe we have an opportunity to take some questions. I think we have a good 15 minutes or so. So I think if there are some questions, perhaps most welcome to join me here. In terms of the reaction, a couple of things I just wanted to mention. As you see from the themes of the study and your distinguished comments, the aspect of this market moving from, rightly put, Shahed, an affinity to values-based, as reflected in success story Saffron and others also that are evolving towards this paradigm of a broader values-based opportunity as one big theme. The second big theme around education, and again, we're proud that we focused on this space, and we need to focus more. We actually took a dive one layer deep, but we need to actually further go deep because this opportunity of education is one that is tremendous and not at all served relative to where we are in the food space where we're maturing to a different paradigm. So one of the things I just wanted to throw it out to Errol perhaps is, we're talking about in context of this space of halal, embracing and becoming part of the wider organic or wholesome lifestyle space is in terms of its global context, and this Whole Foods is obviously a global entity, the organic global market versus the global halal market. In that context, I mean, our numbers in some ways show that the halal market by itself is much, much larger. I believe organic is about $60-some billion globally, and it depends on how we're defining it. But do you see a role of this very, traditional halal market in actually addressing whatever challenges the organic space is facing here nationally as well as globally? And what would be some of those things? So that's a question I have in context of that. And then on the education side, I just wanted to mention one thing, and it was a little bit of my fault, and I think as you all saw, mashallah, Sister Iman did a wonderful job presenting it. The global market aspect of the Muslim market numbers that we showed in the beginning mentioned the food and travel and fashion, but certainly Islamic finance is one of the largest opportunities in spending categories for American Muslims also. So we just didn't put all of them on the slide. So I just wanted to clarify that. So I think financing sector has tremendous. There's a long ways to go relative to food. So I think in that context, I know we don't have a finance representatives, but Adnan or Shahed, I mean, whoever has touched finance, your feedback on that will also be interesting. And again, any more questions, I think we have an opportunity.
Yes, well, before we get those answers, if anybody, I believe we have about 10 minutes or so, so if anybody has any questions, you can come up to the front, right? There's a microphone here, and we'll catch your question. And we just have probably room for just a few more questions. Okay, go ahead, Errol, while we get those.
Yeah, our biggest problem in organic and natural foods is supply right now, actually. So we definitely couldn't support all halal consumers based on the market sizing of halal versus organic and natural. As other folks in the industry can attest, finding the products that meet our quality standards is challenging. We actually just need to convince more American producers, more farmers, more manufacturers to make products that meet our standards. So I do see a lot of connections based on the demographics, like we had mentioned before, with education, with customers wanting to buy products with the values that reflect their own. And I think organic is a part of that. Organic foods is a very, very fast-growing sector, but when you add the non-GMO sector and you add pasture-raised dairy products, you add whole grains and ancient grains, it's a lot larger than just organic, and I think organic will continue to be the leading edge. So ultimately, that demand needs to be translated all the way back down to the farm level, especially here in the U.S., where we're having to import products sometimes in order to meet just the volume needs for Whole Foods, and we're a relatively small retailer. So I'm hoping that that demand becomes more visible, that we see more Muslim consumers engaging in the food system and food industry, food NGOs, and food civil society, so that folks understand that the marketplace is that much bigger than they had anticipated.
Thank you. Okay, we'll take some questions. We have about 10 minutes or less, so we'll just take some quick questions and quick answers.
If I can suggest, maybe we go with 4 or 5, just take the questions.
All together.
And all together, maybe 4 or 5 questions, and then see if the group responds, so we can...
Sure.
Sounds good. Thanks, you guys, for being here. My name is Amin Asser. My question is for Adnan. Adnan, Saffron Road, I feel like, is a seminal case of a halal foods brand that has really gone and tackled this bigger industry. I'm interested in the composition. What is a composition of your customer in terms of Muslim and non-Muslim? Thank you.
And then we'll go to the second question, if you can remember that one.
Yes. Hi guys, thank you for taking the time being here today. My question was actually directed to the founder of Saffron Road. I wanted to imply also the organic model is actually a surge that we're currently experiencing. Do you see a surge for more diversification for halal products, like the kosher model suits a lot of different aspects besides just traditional kosher foods? Do you see like a surge maybe or a market that'll be open to more diversification?
Okay, thank you. So that's for Whole Foods. And we'll just take 2 more and then we'll answer.
Well, why don't we, if I can just answer, because I'll answer both those with the same answer. So I think that'll be easier. First of all, our model was never built on serving just the Muslim consumers. And today we speculate that probably 70 or 80% of our consumers are non-Muslim. They were very clear on the box. We stamp halal about 5 times all over the box. So you'd either have to be retarded or illiterate if you buy our product and not know it's halal. So, it is a clear opt-in, but at the same time, we feel we're lifting the values around halal. And, we're not, while our chickpeas are organic, none of our other products are. They're antibiotic-free. We were the first nationally sold antibiotic-free boxed entree in Whole Foods when we launched in 2011 and 10. So, we've lifted the standards around that. And one thing about the study is it's an excellent study that DinarStandard did, but to me it's somewhat of a self-selected study because it probably went out primarily to, many of you probably accounted for 10 or 20% of the study. A lot of the same groups we know got the emails, they responded to it. So you're kind of in an echo chamber. So the statistics that are in there, you're drawing from the Muslim community, which is great. We need to know what those demographics are. But there's a much bigger demographic of Muslims outside the respondent sample of this survey, which are some Muslims who never even ate halal before, who now we've attracted, they're eating halal because they would have preferred organic or antibiotic-free. And also there's a lot of Muslims who just aren't that devout, but when they start seeing halal foods show up in the marketplace, and there's availability of them in 50 states and over 10,000 stores, they're now drawn to buy halal. So that's the way we move the needle a little bit in terms of the question around organic or other areas of kosher. We have a huge advantage over the kosher market. It's much easier to merchandise, much easier to stock. There's much bigger opportunity here than in kosher. Also, the demographic is very young. 70%, 80% are below the age of 40. And they're coming onto their own with very high income and very high education demographics. 1 out of 5 American Muslim households has an MD or PhD in it. And the American Muslim woman is the second most educated woman in America, according to Gallup, after the Jewish American woman. So there's some tremendous opportunities in the crossover versus kosher out there.
What we did with kosher, if I could just add on, is that I grew up in a kosher household, so I was intimately familiar with how awful many kosher products were when I grew up. I just wanted to make stuff that tasted good and that met our quality standards and applied those product attributes to kosher products. And it's been a parallel growth curve to halal the last 5 years, where we took organic and non-GMO and whole grain and quinoa and gluten-free and just applied it to traditional kosher products. And now we have a kosher assortment that actually tastes good, it's high quality, it's something we're proud of, and it's something that spurred innovation, not just at Whole Foods, but across the kosher industry, because we've selected, just like with Saffron Road and Halal, we're working with Hatem Foods and with Straits, who are family names in the kosher industry. So it's been a parallel path. The difference here is that we need more brands to jump on the halal bandwagon and apply those product attributes and ingredient and quality standards to products that are traditionally found in halal households.
Thank you.
My name is Ahmed Adam from Crescent Foods. My question to Whole Foods, we're talking about an educated consumer. We're talking about affluent consumers have money to spend. But what do you do at Whole Foods in order really to tell your story about the value system that you have, and also to increase not just the awareness, but a deeper education to build or foster those values in the consumer base?
And who's this directed to? Whole Foods? Yes. Whole Foods. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we just launched a brand campaign for the first time ever. We don't usually advertise. I actually think we have a lot of opportunity with educating our consumers, and we actually rely on our brands a lot for that. As much as we do marketing, it's very lifestyle focused. And so somebody like Saffron Road's been great, but also many of our other brands who we've partnered with, like in fair trade and non-GMO, to help educate our consumers. I do want to point out one thing, especially in terms of the premium aspect, is that we've actually also really focused on making sure we're price competitive, because we want to make sure that we're accessible to as many consumers as possible. And while products at Whole Foods do tend to be more expensive due to the ingredients and the sourcing, we're actually putting a lot of time and effort into not just educating consumers, but making sure that we have competitive price points so that more folks can afford it, regardless of education and income. But overall, I do think that's a big opportunity for us and something we're really just getting started on a national level, telling folks about what we do.
Okay, thank you. I don't think, if it's a quick question, we can do it. We only have 2 minutes.
If I can have
We just have 2 minutes left.
Yes. Just a question about the study. I'm a physician and have been reading studies for for 40 years, and we look at it in a very critical way. And do you publish this study somewhere so I can look at the method, the tools, the numbers,
Sure,
the references?
you're looking right at him. You can talk to him right after the
But do
conference.
you publish anywhere?
And
It's on the website.
yes, you can download the executive summary on the website.
That throwing away the numbers, you said that mosque has been doubled since 2001. This number, I don't know where this come from, because this is very good that we may have 10,000 mosques, but it is also worrisome, because it is the disposable income which makes this mosque, and maintenance and the building of this mosque is taking away a chunk of the pie. So how do you think about that?
Well, we have I think we're going to take that one offline. We have the executive summary. We'll start with that.
I will say something.
We only have 1 minute
1
left, so
minute.
if you want to just wrap that one up. But
Just 1
definitely
minute.
after the session, you can talk to Shahed about that.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you all. My question is quick. This is directed to Whole Foods. Thank you for being here. I would like to know, in addition to all of the standards that you look for, from top to bottom, what are the traits that you're looking for a new product to appear on the shelf at Whole Foods? Thank you.
And just 30 seconds. Yes, all that in 30 seconds.
Buying 101 in 30 seconds. We have a lot of buyers. We're very decentralized. So at Whole Foods, you can go to a store sometimes and sell your product in. You can go to a regional office, or you could do like Adnan did and actually start with the national office. So we have our quality standards. We have several dozen, I think over 200 ingredients we do not allow, which are all scientifically based on whether or not they constitute natural or if they're actually needed in the products. There's taste. Are they good? Do they appeal to the product trends that folks are looking for? And then do they meet our values? And by that we mean, are they the highest quality? Are they supporting healthy eating? Are they seeking to protect and support the communities that they're from and the environment? And so that's the sort of decisions that go into making our product decisions at Whole Foods. And we also have programs like our local producer loan program, where if you have a good relationship with the region and you're a small business, we give out low interest loans.
Thank you.
Thank you for all that you do.
I'd like to thank the distinguished panelists that we have here. They came from all over the country. Thank you very much. If you have any further questions, you can just catch them in the bazaar or somewhere else during the day. Thank you.